Hey there, everyone. Just wanted to share with you just a couple of, just opinions, I guess, of mine that create very immersive types of design when it comes to game development. And these are just two key points that, as an art director, that I have really tried to instill in my teams, with my producers, creative directors, to try and realize in our game developments. And even just as an indie game developer, these are things that are very high on my list to try and achieve. But before I get into those 2 points, I wanted to share real quick just a story relating to those points. A story concerning the first day I started at Atari as art director there. And the funny thing is I think we've all heard, at least those of you that are developers, when you're talking to people and they ask you what you do and you say, well, I do game development, or I do game design or game art, or, I do code for gaming and whatever. Most of the time, people will, they'll kind of shirk and they'll be like, oh, so you play games all day. I mean, obviously you want to test and play your own game as much as you can, find that fun factor. However, I think there's just people over-romanticize, the act of development, that you just go around and you just play games all day. Well, the first day at Atari, I walked into my executive producer's office and sat down, and he was getting ready to kind of go over my job description and the expectations and the things that he'd like to see me deposit into the studio and into our productions. After we got done doing that discussion, he pointed down to the corner, and there was a box there with a handful of games, about 15 different titles, and they were, a lot of them were Atari's latest titles, things that they had just developed within the last 2 to 3 years. And he sat there and he said, Mark, I would like for you to spend this week, your first week, playing and going over and reviewing each of these games, and then I'd like you to present me a detailed report on how you are going to make their art better. So that week was awesome. All right, so literally, to that statement, all you do is play games all day. Yeah, you bet. I played games for a whole week on a salary. It was magic. It was great. I loved it. It was fantastic. But getting back to the original point, the 2 tips I wanted to bring out that I feel create great immersion in games is, after that review of those titles, just kind of looking over my notes and sitting down and discussing kind of the post-mortem of these games, the 2 things that really stuck out to me were the fact that the games they could have done a lot better on their lighting, and they could have done a lot better on their animation. And I find that these 2 areas are very, very important when it comes to obviously creating immersion in a game. Now, talking about lighting, if you think about lighting on a whole, lighting literally is, in a sense, almost the biggest character on screen. I mean, lighting affects everything. All right, so having good lighting in a game, boy, man, that sets the mood for everything. It sets the emotion, sets the tone, sets the pacing, sets the attitude, all these different things. I mean, you don't have to reach too far to find examples of, what lighting does. You take horror games or suspenseful games, the lighting's usually very dark, causing a lot of silhouettes, causing a lot of long shadows, a lot of areas that aren't very distinct, and create a lot of mystery or, a lot of anxiety or unsurety. And then, of course, you have other games that are very open world that have key and ambient types of lights that illuminate, the world on a whole. So it allows everything to really be appreciated. Things are very clear. And so that's another aspect of just the importance of lighting. When you're in an open world, you want to be able to see what's available to you. A couple of the other strategies when it comes to lighting, if you think about just by way of design, a lot of times designers and art directors will get together. I know I did for many of the publishers I worked for in development teams, is the fact I'd sit down with the designers and we would figure out ways to utilize lighting in a visual sense to highlight what we call POIs, or points of interest, as well as even potentially to breadcrumb the player, as it were. Maybe that's in a large world or in a puzzle-solving type of environment, how to get through certain environments by leading them by way of light. And I mean, if you think about it, let's say you're in a dark room, but on the far end you see a door that's cracked open and you see some light spilling out. Well, obviously you're going to be going towards that light. You're going to be going towards that warmth, something there that gives you a little bit more information on what's going on than just staying in a dark, foreboding room. So lighting is very, very important when it comes to game and sets the mood and the tone for everything that you're trying to achieve. Now, the second point concerning animation is absolutely crucial, I believe, for creating the right type of immersions. I mean, we've all played the games where we have the characters and you see their feet skating, on the ground. They're not anchored, they're not weighted very well, and so it doesn't necessarily look like they're connected to their environment. It's almost like the old school color forms on the green felt background where they're just kind of placed there. And so animation becomes very, very important in order to instill that realistic weighting, that anchoring, that undulation, and then you get into other aspects of animation that really sell movement, sell personality and style is, let's say, secondary animation. And now what I mean by secondary animation, to give an example, let's say you've got a character that's got a big afro. And let's say the character's running and then all of a sudden stops, dead in his tracks. But secondary animation would keep that afro moving until it finally slowed down and settled to a static position. That's what we call secondary animation. Again, another great way to illustrate inertia, another great way to illustrate movement. And then you have another aspect of animation, which is known as anticipation animation. And an example of that would be, let's say you're playing a fighting game, and instead of just having the character kind of in their idle stance and then you hit the button and he just punches straight out, anticipation animation would be the slight pulling back or coiling and then the release. That would be known as anticipation. And so making sure that your feet are anchored to the environment, that you've got nice weighting on the animation to really show that undulation, to show those real subtle types of movements, that secondary animation, the anticipation types of animation, key. Really, really key, because the player is going to be focused on that avatar a lot. I mean, almost 100% of the game is going to be that, depending on the genre or what have you. But the point still stands. Lighting is key. Animation is key. So take that, put that in your quiver, utilize that for your productions, and just kind of make sure that you're really incorporating those touchstones into your pipeline, because, again, like I said, it really sells immersion. So, as always, if you guys want to just give me a shout out, or just let me know what's happening with your developments, or if you have any questions, the information's right there below, info@indiegameuniversity.com. So I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.